Agenda item 1, declarations of members' interests. Does any member have any interest to declare? Agenda item 2, confirmation of minutes. Do you agree that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 10th of October 2017 as printed be approved as a correct record?
Agree.
Agree. Thank you. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. Sir, Rory.
Apologies from Councillor Heath and Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Dave.
Councillor Williams.
Lee.
Councillor Brooke and Councillor Thurlow.
Councillor
Thank you.
And I've got Councillor Harkin. Thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements. Are there any announcements from the leader or head of paid service? No, thank you. Agenda item 5A1, report of the Planning Committee. I call on the Chairman of the Planning Committee, Councillor M.A. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was very formal. I move that the report of the meetings held on the 7th of November, 5th of December, the special meeting held on the 19th of December 2017 and the meeting held on the 16th of January 2018 be received. There are no recommendations referred to Council. The matters determined by the committee were all in exercise of its delegated powers and I will take questions on those matters. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Chairman? Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I noticed in the reports that reports of the meetings that we have a report of enforcement activity on planning. The first time, whilst I've been in the council, that we've had this and we've had significant capacity. And I just wondered whether the chair of the planning committee would give us an update on this very welcome development. Thank you.
Any further questions? Chairman to reply.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, Brendan, thank you very much for that question. I think it's wonderful to see planning enforcement back on our agenda. At one time, we used to get quarterly reports all the time. But the problem is with austerity and the cutting our staff levels, obviously, you know, we haven't got the staff numbers to actually do it. But now we have our most wonderful, wonderful enforcement officer who's going to blush because he's sat in the back of the room. Who has made great guns since he's been in post. He has done a load of ancient ones that have been hanging around for ages, enforcement, solved them in his own indomitable, quick, brisk, very caring way. And it's wonderful to see that now, you know, we can go to him and if we've got any problems on enforcement, we know that they will be dealt with swiftly and with all concern for both finance and for the reputation of the authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you agree that the report of the Planning Committee be received?
Agree.
Thank you. Agenda item 5A2, report of the Licensing Regulatory Committee. As Chairman of the Licensing Regulatory Committee, I move that the report of the meetings of the Licensing Regulatory Committee held on the 5th of October, 9th of November and the 7th of December 2017 be received. The matters determined by the committee were all in exercise of its delegated powers and I will take questions on those matters. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Do you agree that the report of the Licensing Regulatory Committee be received?
Agree.
Thank you. Agenda item 5A3, report of the Licensing Committee. The meetings of the Licensing Committee of the 5th of October, 9th of November and the 7th of December 2017 were cancelled. Thank you. Agenda item 5A4, report of the Executive Committee. I call on the Chairman of the Executive Committee, Councillor Piddock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For members of the council, I have a piece of paper in my hand. Peace in our time, not an iPad. I have not struggled for the last 5 weeks, worrying myself to death as to whether or not if I push the wrong button, I wipe out a capital city somewhere. I move the report of the meeting of the Executive Committee held on the 18th of October and the 29th of November and the special meeting held on the 18th of December 2017 be received and that each of the recommendations contained therein be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Are there any questions or amendments to the recommendations? Chairman to reply? Nil. Take note of any amendments? Nil. Do you agree that the report of the Executive Committee be received and that the recommendations therein be adopted?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 5A5, report of the Audit Committee. I call on the Chairman of the Audit Committee, Councillor Burns.
Thank you. Chair, I move the report of the meeting of the Audit Committee held on the 14th of December 2017 be received. There are no recommendations referred to Council and the matters determined by the committee were all in exercise of its delegated powers, and I'll take questions on those matters if there are any, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Chairman? Do you agree that the report of the Audit Committee be received?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 5B, questions to the Leader. There have been no questions submitted under notice as required by Standing Order 10.2 and 10.4. Do members have any questions for the Leader of the Council relevant to the business before us tonight? Please refer to the relevant committee, date of committee and minute number when asking questions, rather than the page number. Okay, that's nil. Should move on, thank you. Agenda item 6, Appeals Panel. I call on the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Director of Resources be delegated to establish alternative arrangements for the Appeals Panel in exceptional circumstances.
Is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. The motion is now open for debate.
Agree the motion, Chair.
Agreed the motion, thank you very much.
Agreed.
All those in favour?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 7, notice of motion. I call on Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since Britain joined the European Union, structural funds have been co-financed a wide range of initiatives to promote economic growth, particularly in older industrial areas. With Brexit, that source of funding will disappear. This Council therefore welcomes the UK Government's commitment to establishing a UK Shared Prosperity Fund as a potential source of new funding. However, there are several unresolved issues that could play a pivotal role in delivering the growth and the jobs that, in the places that need them most. Industrial Communities Alliance has proposed the Shared Prosperity Fund budget should be set at a level that not only compensates the loss of EU funding, 1.5 billion a year, but also provides additional resources to match the scale of the challenge to deliver growth and prosperity across Britain. The fund should focus on narrowing the local and regional differences in economic well-being. Local authorities should have a strong hand in the management of the new fund. Local authorities are most closely attuned to the local needs and should take key decisions about spending priorities. This is not a debate about whether we leave the European Union or we don't leave the European Union. That debate is long gone. This is about what happens when we are out of the Union and some of our areas of our country are still suffering levels of deprivation. The Industrial Alliance, of which we are members, was born out of the Coalfields Alliance many years ago. It is a well-known and very advanced lobbying organisation. It has the wherewithal to have the ear of government ministers, irrelevant of the politics in this particular case. And I believe as a council and as a member of the Industrial Alliance, then we should support their efforts to secure the funding that is or will be needed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Dave, could I ask you to ask the council if they agree to the motion?
Oh, sorry. Please forgive me, Councillor Pedder. No.
All right, sorry. I do apologise, the age of technology has caught up with me. The Council agrees to write to the Chancellor and Secretaries of State for Business and Communities with copies to local MPs calling on the UK Government to incorporate these proposals into the structure of UK Shared Prosperity Fund.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a second then?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. The motion is now open for debate. Councillor Prophet?
I would like to wholeheartedly agree with this motion, particularly in the light of the decision to leave the EU, which is an elephant in all of our rooms currently. The issue for me is how we, as a council that have been absolutely hammered by austerity cuts time and time again by central government, other Labour councils, particularly in the north, West and the north of England are similar. We rely heavily upon European funding that is still administered through people like the Local Enterprise Partnership. We need to strengthen our position as local authorities to put pressure on central government to ensure that economic disparity, which is becoming an absolute disgrace in this country, is addressed through whatever mechanisms that are in place after the European Union exit. It is incredibly important to us. We see buildings in this town that house important jobs and have been incredibly important in maintaining our economic levels as they are, and still we are falling back behind other parts of the country, particularly other Tory-led councils who haven't been hammered as hard as we have by the austerity. So I welcome this absolutely. I see it as an opportunity for us to maintain the economic growth that we've got at the moment and catch up with the rest of the country and end the postcode lottery as far as economic assistance to local authorities as it is being administered by this government.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor McKeown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion has been put before us, and I've had a look at the post-Brexit regional policy, which was proposed from the Industrial Communities Alliance. It does state, as it's been stated in here, they welcome the Conservative manifesto commitment to create a UK Shared Prosperity Fund to replace the EU structural funds, asking for the UK government and the devolved administrators to sign up to our agenda. This agenda has been asked for by a cross-party alliance, and from this side of the debate, I can't see any problem with it, and wholeheartedly, back it. And what Councillor Peddick was saying before, it was started up predominantly from coal mining, but it was also from shipbuilding, and unfortunately we are in an area which is we need the benefit of something like this, so I would say we agree with it.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments? Councillor Peddick to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief. I welcome the comments and support from Rory, and hopefully we can now move forward as a united council to support the Industrial Alliance and the
programme.
Thank you. The motion will now be put to vote. All those in favour? Councillor Cassidy? Sorry. Unanimous? Agenda item 8, notice of motion. I call on Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the notice of motion detailed to item 8 of the Council's summons. It's a short motion, straightforward. It was written about 10 days ago, and times have moved on, but not in a favourable way. As you can see, it says the Council is dismayed and angered by the recent scenes in emergency departments across the country. Council condemns the government for its failure to adequately fund the NHS and the care system, which has put lives at risk and placed intolerable burdens on hospital staff. Council resolves to do all within its power to assist the NHS, but is fully conscious that there is no substitute for adequate funding from the government. Many of you, perhaps all of you, saw last night's BBC News the scenes over in Stockton in the hospital there, in the emergency department there. The strain that the staff are under, the intolerable position that the patients are under. The ambulance is tied up there that they couldn't get out, so the response times for people who need urgent ambulance service were down. We saw the same thing last year. I mean, this time last year it was Blackburn that we were seeing them from. And from my own experience, it was happening in other hospitals that last January. It's predictable. It's easily predictable. We know the levels previously. We know that we have an ageing population. We know that it was predicted by Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS. But it was the funding that he pointed out was needed was turned down. And this, the figure is often pointed at the Health Secretary on this. But this comes right back to the core of government. This is about Prime Ministers and Chancellors of the Exchequer, whether that's David Cameron and George Osborne, or whether it's Theresa May and Hammond. That is where the money needs to come from. That is the levels of funding that are needed. We have a far more ageing population than we used to have. The needs of those people are far greater, and you only had to look at those poor elderly people on the trolleys in Stockton last night to see what the position is. We have got to move on. It is not a failure of emergency departments if they can't get people out of there. They've assessed the patients, they know what needs to happen, they need to get out onto the wards. That is a failure of capacity further else, not in the hospitals with the numbers of cuts in beds that we've had, 15,000 beds I understand gone. But it's also a failure, as we know, in social services because they can't get people who are ready for discharge back into the community. We're fortunate here that our local hospital trust has worked hard both last year and this year to arrange additional capacity. Rysdale in particular have got extra beds so that they can get elderly people out, but that's clearly been swamped this year. We've got cancellations of basically all, they'd already, I think, cancelled some of them. They knew it was going to happen in the beginning of January. We're now in a position where they're all cancelled right through to the end of January. And this has consequences for people. That in itself has consequences. Not just the people in pain or with sight problems not being solved, but some of those patients are in for assessments that actually will turn out to be not too good. And I have experience of that myself with a family member last year. We have got to move on from this. We have got to address the issues of how we fund social care properly, and it's clear that it just isn't being. It's been allowed to be kicked around. Proposals that were made were summed up as a death tax or whatever to increase the funding. But we have got to move on in this. We as a council, the motion does say that we as a council will do all we can to support. That is not just idle words. We as a council deal with the disabled facilities grants, and I think it's a matter of pride, something that we should take as a council, the work that we've done this year to increase the take-up of those grants by taking away the need for the overwhelming majority of people to make a contribution to those grants. We're working on that. We have now got, and I think it's very rare, I'm not aware of anywhere else that's done it, we have got occupational therapy capacity being funded by the council so that people are assessed quickly, so that those disabled facilities grants are being done. And that is going in at the right end. It's going in, a lot of that is prevention work. Some of it, though, is that work that needs to be done to get people out back into their homes. We should take pride in that, but I would call on members opposite to support on this. You know, words from them to their government undoubtedly are going to be more powerful in terms of politics than words from this side of the floor. And I would urge council members to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second then? Councillor Is this a second then?
Yeah.
Councillor Williams, thank you. Okay, I've got two people showing that they wish to speak.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Come on, I've got...
No, fair.
Do you want to speak as a second then?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sweeney's made a really good case and covered all the challenges that the NHS face. If you didn't see the BBC News report, it's online. I suggest you do watch it because it was based in a top performing hospital. So if they're struggling, it makes you wonder what the others are. And this is during the winter where there's no unusual demand, there's no events that have caused this. This is normal winter spike. So if there ever was anything that actually was unplanned, I dread to think how some hospitals would cope. They also highlighted the amazing work the NHS staff are doing. I think we should highlight that even through that report, and we know they work hard. The professionalism and great care and conviction, they work under extreme duress, they're undervalued and underworked. There is a failure, as Brendan said, to keep people from going into hospital in the first place, and a failure to move them out of hospital. We as councillors, we need to look to fund, support or influence any services which address these factors to help ease the pressure on the hospitals. Despite the cuts, we should still look to provide playgrounds, parks, leisure centres, preserve natural beauty, because these are important for maintaining good health. The culture and arts, the library and the forum, these are all good for mental health. We need to keep that balance of well-being. We need to address the poor living standards and deprivation. Schools are important for children to establish good health habits, and physical education and their well-being starts at schools. We need to make sure they're supported in everything they do, along with children's centres. So I think although this is a call for NHS funding, we can do more ourselves, and we should be looking to support anyone that actually contributes to the health and well-being of our borough.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, the motion is now open for debate. I've got Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, I would like to endorse the views expressed by Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Roberts. Theresa May confidently asserted that the NHS was the best prepared it has ever been for winter, but this boast was discredited by NHS England statistics, which showed the true and shocking scale of the crisis. And it's the patients and the staff who are bearing the brunt of it all. Members from these benches were in Barrow Town Centre a week last Saturday, campaigning to defend Furness General Hospital from regional government cuts that could total 500 million. The pressure on the NHS under the Tories is underlined by the fact that at the beginning of January, 60 patients in our area needed a hospital bed, yet not a single one was available. And it isn't hard to work out what things would be like if fresh budget cuts of 500 million were imposed. Mr. Chairman, the response we received from the public in just 1 hour in Dalton Road was magnificent. People from all walks of life stopped to sign our petition, and our campaign will continue. Tory MP Sarah Wollaston has rightly said that the government needs to get a grip of the NHS crisis. To do this, they will need to properly fund public services, and if not, they should make way for a Labour government that will secure the future of our NHS.
you, Councillor. Call on Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak in support, of course, of this motion and agree with Councillor Sweeney, Councillor Roberts and, of course, Councillor Cassidy. We have, as a council, as Councillor Sweeney said, been working closely with our NHS professionals over a number of years to try and get things in our communities actually touching to make sure health and well-being are improving, but it's very difficult when funding is being chopped so disgracefully. The NHS touches every one of us, and if we don't stand up and save it now, it will be smashed by privatisation. And that is a direct quote from Polly Toynbee, a well-respected campaigner and a reporter of long standing, and they're out there talking about this now. And it's a real issue, this privatisation thing, especially this week when we've witnessed the collapse of one of the biggest private companies in England, who do very little other work than that of government contracts and council contracts. And I think this has blown the whole myth of private sector good out of the water. Also this week, a young lady, she was on Question Time, I think she hit the nail on the head when she said the government are deliberately starving the NHS of funding so they can say to people the NHS does not work, then they can move to a different way of funding this service using the private sector. And we have Jeremy Hunt telling us that waiting times are unacceptable. And he's been saying the same thing for years. In 2014, he said waiting times for an appointment to see a GP or a hospital appointment is unacceptable. In 2015, he said waiting for a service if you have a mental health problem is unacceptable. In 2016, he said waiting for an assessment for care is unacceptable. In 2017, he said he agreed that waiting to get into an A&E and waiting in a queue of ambulances to get into a hospital is, guess what, unacceptable. And I think we would all like to tell Jeremy Hunt it is his management of our National Health Service that's unacceptable. We know that our NHS is under greater financial squeeze than ever before. The last budget the Chancellor gave the service less than half of the funding it needs to just stand still. We know also that all of this started with Andrew Lansley's internal market, parcelling up services for the private sector to take over. And we know private sector takes profit before delivering the service. It's been a disaster and it's unacceptable. And we have had the ludicrous situation with Boris Johnson and Michael Gove cynically using the NHS during the referendum campaign, promising that £350 million a week will go into health. This has been called out as a lie, and I think we can see through that. So they are now panicking. Boris is asking today for more money for health, and it looks like he's been smacked down by the Prime Minister. So we know now they can't be trusted. Staff are burnt out and overworked and underpaid, and 75,000 people left in ambulances for hours on end. Then waiting on trolleys in corridor for a service. This is unacceptable. Our health service and its staff are amongst the best in the world. We have to fight for its future. That's why this motion is so important. And I hope today we do the right thing in passing this motion unopposed in this chamber so that we all can demonstrate how much we care about our NHS. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Prophet.
Thank you very much, and firstly apologies for the fact that this corner of the room is slightly noisier than normal. I hope colleagues understand my predicament. I would like to absolutely endorse everything that's been said so far. I don't think anyone in this council chamber could argue with the truthfulness and the analysis within the motion itself, and also of what colleagues have said so far. I want to just add a little bit to what Councillor Burns has said about the woman who spoke on Question Time. Let's not beat around the bush, and let's not kid ourselves that this is any kind of avoidable accident on behalf of the current government. They have sleepwalked into this winter crisis, and it is a crisis. I happen to speak to one of the most respected GPs, senior GPs in Furness, who said these are unprecedented times. His words, unprecedented times in health. From access to acute hospitals, to social care, to our young people's mental health in CAMHS. This is no accident. This, in my view, and in the views of many other people who stand on the other side of the political chasm, is a managed decline. And it is a managed decline for one reason only, and that is so they can dismantle the NHS in the way that they have tried to dismantle local governments, in the way that they are dismantling the welfare state. And we shouldn't be afraid of facing up to that fact. This is about privatisation. This is about managing the National Health Service down to a level where they argue that only the private sector to come in and rescue it. And let's have a look at what the private sector have done for public services recently. Carillion, prime example of how outsourced public sector work is working. The bailed out Southwest trains, another prime example of privatisation. The NHS is an absolute national treasure. People out there respect it, they love it, they will protect it. I mean, and there are a couple of forgive me for I get a little bit kind of emotional about it, because I've not worked in the NHS, but I've organised in hospitals, and I tell you what, 10 years ago they were working at full capacity. Now I cannot imagine what it is like to deliver services in that NHS. These are people that are working their fingers to the bone. They are underpaid, undervalued by the government, and it is about time that we basically say enough is enough. The government is managing this NHS into a spiral of decline, and this winter's crisis is a prime example of that. It was avoidable. It needs investment. People are willing to invest in their NHS to protect the services that we've got. Enough is enough. We need to send a message to Theresa May and her team. Jeremy Hunt has basically been exposed on Twitter for being at best liberal with the truth by Ralph Little, the actor. I mean, and he won't even meet with Ralph and debate with Ralph because he knows that he's not really been truthful. And when you've got Lurch from the royal family schooling the health minister, we're in a bit of trouble, aren't we? As I say, I know I'm repeating myself now, but let's not forget that this was totally avoidable. It is politically motivated, and it is designed to privatise our health service. Enough is enough. Say no.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Maddox.
I've got first-hand knowledge of the NHS. Last year, when I broke my ankle, I ended up having to go to hospital. I was 11 hours on a trolley before I got into a ward. When I got into that ward on the orthopaedic side, I was the only orthopaedic in there. The rest of the people in there were old people who were waiting for treatment. I couldn't believe it. I used to work in the hospital and I couldn't believe that an orthopaedic ward, I was the only person there. The girls in there, the nurses, were run ragged. I shouldn't say girls because there was men as well, but they were run ragged and it was a nightmare to see. And I support this motion wholeheartedly. Having been through it, I know what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sweeney, Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. There seems to be a bit of fake news going around here, but first of all, let me say the Labour government have no record of running the National Health Service at any good rate at all. Their rate of North Staffordshire Hospital, for a start off, made the problem, or showed the problem up. And anybody with any common sense knows that in a crisis like we've had with flu epidemics, there is going to be problems in the A&E. So let's get down to the facts. The Conservative government this year in the autumn budget recognised the need for administrative and additional funding. They are supporting the National Health Service with an additional £437 million and £1 billion extra social care funding as well. The record levels of funding to ease pressure on A&E departments has made the National Health Service more prepared this year than ever before. And coming to the A&E problems, let's not forget Gordon Brown, when the medical profession were grumbling, invited them down to Downing Street, gave them a pay rise beyond the dreams. He also told them no more out of hours working, no more weekend working, and when asked the question, what will people do in those hours, he turned around and said, they can go to A&E. Well, now we're reaping the benefits of that comment, because the A&E is being inundated with people with very, very small illnesses, which normally they would have gone to the doctors. So it's not all about funding, it's about policies. The Conservatives, let's get local. The Conservatives built the Furness and General Hospital with hundreds of millions of money invested in this town. They've just invested another 12 million in a maternity unit which is just about to be opened. Also, they've given the go-ahead for a health centre to be built on the Alfred Barrow School. Now then, what have Labour invested in the health service in Barrow? Even when John Hutton was Minister, it was the Furness General Hospital was downgraded. It was a grade 1 when Margaret Thatcher opened it, and it has been downgraded. Departments were closed when people left, when managers left, and Kendal were the beneficiaries. Our MP is jumping on every bandwagon he can, popularity bandwagon, but while Tim Farron is putting a bill through Parliament to state that no person should go for radiation treatment that would have to travel more than 45 minutes. Now, that just conveniently puts Barrow in the Kendal area. We can get to Kendal in 40, and he is trying to get the new radiation unit in Kendal, which is another thing which we have to look after. I think the Labour Party should stop worrying about national politics. That's the job of the MPs in Parliament. Our job is to look after local problems and sort out local problems. The County Council and the Barrow Town are going downhill because we're not looking after things that are relevant to the people in this town, as well as the National Health Service, which the Furness General is doing a great job, and the sharp end of the job is being looked after very well. But things like the County Council Social Care Department has been inspected twice under the Labour Council, found wanting. Young children are being put under risk and suffering because of the way the social care unit of the County Council is being run and handled and managed. Black Tarmac Academy has been allowed to replace street paving in Dalton Road and the outdoor market.
Alan, please could I ask you to sum up? We've just gone over 5 minutes.
Right, okay. I think, to be honest, if we all work together, we can get this town back up and running again, and the county. But we have to work together, and it's not going to work if you keep jumping on politically correct popularity statements like this one today. And I don't think this is going to do the people of Barrow or the county much good, this motion. It is something which is political, and it isn't going to do anything practical to help the people in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Piddick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It wasn't my intention to join in the debate on the national health, because everybody is saying everything that I would have said anyway, and obviously you just don't want to stand up and repeat what everybody else has said. What I want to do is take exception with the comments made by Councillor Pemberton. The town of Barrow-in-Furness, I can't speak for the county council, I'm not a county councillor, I'm the leader of the Barrow Borough Council. Barrow is not going down. Barrow is surviving, it's planning, it's changing how it operates. We have a council plan that looks at how we're going to improve things for the people of the borough. We're not going down, we haven't given up the ghost, even though Barrow-in-Furness has been hit twice by central government in terms of grant cuts, 5 million on the first occasion, and we lost 20% of our staff. The second time they came around and asked for 2.3 million, and then said, oh no, you won't be getting new homes bonus, so it's now 2.7 million that you've got to find. This Labour Council has tried to continue providing the services for the people of the borough, which we are doing, and we are making inroads into clearing the deficit. We have plans for that, etc. We are not going down. I take real exception to what Councillor Pemberton is saying. Of course, this is a man who, when we were hit by a £5 million cut, was more concerned about cutting the grass on Walney than he was about saving jobs and operating the system that we need to operate for the people of the borough. So I do take exception. And if he talks about working together, I have no objection to that. However, how can you work together when someone's kicking you in the shins? Just doesn't work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Barrow.
Yes, I was just going to comment on Mr. Pemberton's comments. I'd like him to tell this council, because he'll know how many millions of pounds in the last 7 years this government has cut money funding to this authority. And it's going on that he's saying that we can't do certain things and this for the town and all that. No wonder. I'm going around making all kinds of excuses to my electorate about what's going on and telling them the whole truth. And I think it's getting through to them. But I don't believe in the comments that you've just come up with there. I think this government, I think the NHS, it's 70th anniversary this year, yeah? 1948, 2018. And what it does for this country and everybody, not just certain people that can afford private medical attention, for everybody. And I've got, like I say, lately, with my son, he ended doing just before Christmas in the hospital with a broken collarbone. And he got the operation done there and then, talking to the surgeons. So don't come that. This service is needed by, there's two things in this country that's needed. That's health and education.
I agree.
And if you don't put the money into it, and this government done, and Jeremy Hunt, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him.
Des, could I ask you to direct it at me rather than direct it at an individual?
Yeah, right, sorry, yeah. And Jeremy Hunt, that for what he's saying now, and he's taking on more responsibilities and he can't even do the job right that he's doing already. So it's about time that this company woke up to what's going on. And I hope they do before it's not too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call on Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks, Chair. I didn't want to get up, just listen to fantastic debate, but I'm taking exception when we go back to the days of Gordon Brown and the Labour government. I'll tell you what, when Gordon Brown and the Labour government was in, we didn't have soup kitchens, we didn't have food banks, and we go on about the places run down. There's only one government running down. I can remember £199 million being taken there when they did away with the North West Development Agency, and they brought in the LEP. We had the money for the funding for the Marina Village. Gone. We just had a report last week, and I think it's all about the North West Divide, where they're spending the money, Chair. They're on about well, you can do it here, you can do it there. We've got £70 billion to the north and whatever. It got as far as Leeds, and it stopped. So I'm getting a little bit distracted between you two talking. So I'd just like to make it there, if we're going to start blaming the government and whatever, we didn't bring food banks or food or community kitchens into Barrow-in-Furness.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor McClure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, it's very emotional. A lot has been said, a lot I agree with, some I haven't. And what I'm going to say now, probably quite a few of you won't agree with. But I was always brought up with the fact that charity begins at home. And if we do have a problem, which we do have a problem, why can't we take it from the foreign aid budget? I know it's illegal, it's constituent 0.7% of the national the gross national income has to go to the foreign aid. However, France doesn't do it, so I don't see why we should do it. That would free up some money. However, in saying that, that's just my personal opinion. Again, what's been said today is basically it's national things, and we are elected. Everybody in this room here is elected to be a borough councillor to act on behalf of the borough, and that's why we have a general election and we elect a Minister of Parliament who is much more adept and better to get the point across. The motion that's been put forward, it's been worded in two ways. I cannot support the motion which is condemning the government, but I do wholly support anything that we can do to, as a borough, to benefit the NHS and the excellent services it supplies. Myself and the family are appreciative of the excellent service which we've all needed over the past few years. So basically, just to round off, I do support the NHS, but I do not support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor Sweeney to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the first phrases that Councillor Pemberton used was fake news. This is not fake news. I did mention in my speech that I'd experienced this last year. About 53 weeks ago, my brother had a procedure cancelled, a colonoscopy. 51 weeks ago, he was admitted to Preston A&E at 6:30 in the morning with an obstructed bowel. He was there until 9 o'clock in the evening. He was then put for 2 hours onto a day unit because it was a bed, and he didn't get onto a ward until 11 o'clock. It is no one in the NHS's fault that it wasn't expected that there was a problem, but about 4 days later, he was 6 hours in A&E, 6 hours in the operating theatre, had 20 units of fluid to try and keep any blood pressure control at all, and was then in hospital care for 3 weeks. I've been in the position of having to talk to a doctor about whether he should be resuscitated if his heart stopped, and having to give the answer no, because his kidneys weren't working, his blood pressure was under 70, about 70 over 50, and he clearly, if his heart stopped, that was it. And the only reason that discussion was being had was because it was more likely than not that he would die. That is not fake news, that is my experience. And my experience in that A&E department is exactly what I saw in Blackburn last year and what I saw on television last night. A row of trolleys down the middle between the cubicles with old ladies in. These were not people, none of those people were people that could have been dealt with by the GPs. Quite a lot of them have been sent by the GPs. And when we talk about out of hours in Barrow, we have out of hours next door to the A&E, the CHOC service, which does an excellent service. But what I saw there, and obviously going down week after week in the number of weeks that he was in there, was 6, 7, 8 ambulances stood outside A&E. And the day he was admitted, the reason there weren't more there was because they were on trolleys in the ward being looked after by 2 paramedics that hadn't even got into A&E. And when you've seen a middle-aged man, I think with a dislocated arm, self-administrate gas and air for hours, and probably worse, the elderly lady, very elderly lady, looking totally bewildered, sat on a trolley with no one with her, other than as these staff were going past. This is not fake news. And on the question of whether we should only be looking at local issues, there's a huge local issue with our health service, not just the hospitals, in that the shortfall in the budget. That is a local issue because of the problems we've got with the Bay. We're having to run 3 hospitals because we've got a damning piece of water in the middle. It is preposterous to pretend that this isn't political, and it's preposterous to pretend that this isn't local. We're in the most important thing that any government, any council can do is to protect the lives of its public. And we're in the position that the life expectancy in Barrow went down. It's stalled now for about 4 years. It went down after years of it going up. I see Mr. Pemberton shaking his head. That is what the statistics are saying. It's happened all over the place, but it's happened in our town. People are dying younger. And this is a matter of passion, and it surely is what we're about, is to defend not just what we deliver for services, but everything for the people of this town. We don't deliver the railways, but nobody says, oh, we won't campaign on behalf of good rail services and good transport services. This has come down to, in this motion, yes, it is. It's to see where people stand in this council chamber. Where do you want to stand? I'll leave it at that, Chair, but I would ask for a name vote on this motion. And I think Councillor Roberts will second that.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Can I reply to that?
I'm sorry, Councillor, there's no reply.
Lots of things have been said that need answering.
I'm sorry, there's no reply on this. The motion will now be put to the vote, and a name vote will be taken. Thank you.
Please could you say for, against or abstain? Councillors Barlow.
For.
Biggins.
For.
Blizzard.
For.
Burns.
For.
Callister.
For.
Cassidy.
For.
Derbyshire.
For.
Gorn.
Abstain.
Gill.
Abstain.
Hamilton.
For.
Johnston.
For.
McClure R.
Against.
McClure W. McEwen.
For.
McLeavy.
Abstain.
Maddox.
For.
Murphy.
For.
Murray.
Abstain.
Pemberton.
Against.
Piddock.
For.
Preston.
For.
Prophet.
For.
Roberts.
For.
Sweeney.
For.
Thompson C.
For.
Thompson MA.
For.
Wall.
For.
4, 21, against 2, abstentions 5. The motion is carried.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, notice of motion. I call on Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The notice of motion detailed at item number 9 of the Council summons. The Council notes the homelessness has risen by 65% since 2010. rough sleeping by 134 since 2011, and currently over 120,000 children are living in temporary accommodation. Council shares the Public Accounts Committee opinion that the government has been unacceptable, complacent in the face of this national crisis. Council calls on the government to immediately implement the recommendations of the Public Accounts Committee and also to allow councils to build new housing desperately needed. Can I just go on to say that I raised this because of the homelessness, and it's not something I did not know exists. It was a fact that heading into 2018, homelessness has risen among people with mental and physical health problems and increased by 75% since the Conservative government came to power in 2010. Now, I'm not saying that the Labour government never had this problem. The distressing fact is it's not decreased since 2010, but increased. The numbers have risen with someone who is vulnerable because of their mental illness from 3,200 in 2010 to over 5,000 this year. With homeless soaring, it's not a surprise vulnerable families looking for help with evictions on the up. And why? It's not rocket science. It's brought on by a government cuts to welfare, the introduction of universal credit, which is causing hardship all round and problems. What is the problem? No funding. That's a bit of an answer to you, Alan, when you're saying it's not the government's fault. It is the government's fault. They're causing all the problems wherever you go. So if they can come up with funding to save some big works, why can't they not come up with money to save the have-nots? No, it's not a big problem here in Barrow. We all know that, as some places. This is down to the housing officers doing a bit to keep an eye on it, and they're doing a very well job, may I add. Thank you very much. I move the motion, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cassidy to second.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second Councillor McEwen's motion. This government should implement the recommendations of the Public Accounts Committee. Homelessness is a devastating blight on the lives of those who experience it. The average rough sleeper dies before the age of 50, and children in long-term temporary accommodation miss far more schooling than their peers. The latest official figures hammer home the shameful state of homelessness in England and the abject failure of the government's approach to addressing the misery suffered by many thousands of families and individuals. Barrow has maintained its provision of social housing despite the pressures of reduced central government funding, but across the country some people are spending winter nights sleeping rough. We all have a part to play in helping people to maintain a roof over their heads, and local charities, volunteers and selfless individuals continue to be the unsung heroes and heroines of our community with the support that they provide.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think homelessness is absolutely dreadful. I work for a local charity. I volunteer there 4 days a week, and the amount of people we have coming in there locally who are on the verge of losing their homes, and a lot of it's to do with the government absolutely slating people on disability benefits. They don't have a cat in hell's chance. They get this letter that they don't understand because it's about 10 pages long. They have to try and work their way through it. They automatically get turned down for anything they apply for. You know, and then they have to go through the gruelling, and I've been to them with some of my women, the gruelling thing of going in front of an assessor, and then they ask them silly questions like, you know, touch your knee, and, you know, and if they can't, you know, they still get the benefits taken off them. If they can touch the knee, or if they go all dressed smart, they say, well, you can look after yourself. Look at you, you're all dressed smart and nice and clean. But they might have made that effort that day to do it because that's what they think they should do under them circumstances. It's absolutely appalling, the amount of women, and if it wasn't for the fact that this council still managed, under all our dire strait, to fund the disability centre, the amount of money lost by this town through the cutting of disability benefits would be dreadful. And the pressure that it puts on people's mental health. I wish Michael would be here because he's more an expert on mental health than I am, Michael myself. But, you know, the amount of pressure, these tribunals and the assessments and the, you know, saying you're not good enough to get paid, you've got to get a job. You know, these people can't get jobs, you know. God love them, it takes them all the time to get out of bed and make themselves a meal, never mind. Go and sit in the job centre and scour for jobs 4 days a week. You know, it's absolutely ludicrous. And another thing we get in our centre is women fleeing from domestic abuse. You know, you would not believe the amount of domestic abuse that happens in this town. And I just have to say in this, to bring it back down to homelessness, our housing office are spectacular. The women we get in, and you know that they've got to flee from whatever partners of whatever sex, you know, that's nothing to do with it. You know, and our officers take them into their thing, and they get housed as quickly as possible. They're absolutely marvellous. And I think, Kevin, and I think we should write a letter and say, you know, because I think your housing officers who work with our officers from the Women's Community Matters are absolutely magnificent. You know, they try the hardest, you know, because otherwise these people would be out on the streets, literally. They would be out on the streets. You know, and I think it's an indictment, and I think it's really good practice that we've actually managed to keep our housing. You know, because if you're going to housing associations and other things, they've got all these different rules. You know, and people can't get housed with the sympathy and the conviction that they need. And the housing crisis in Barrow would be far more and far greater if we didn't have our own housing. Thank you.
Can I just say, I never did any of that because it could be the people travelling in the car. Could Andy read everything?
If that is the case, could I please ask, obviously, the people in the corner there to please keep quiet and show a little bit of respect.
No, that's fair enough, but we can't even hear half of what's being said.
Maybe shut up then. Can I ask you, we do have the microphones on. Can you hear what I'm saying?
You can hear what you're saying.
Can you do us a test call, Anne, please? Anne, would you just speak into your microphone just to say?
Oh, with my voice?
Yeah.
So if we can hear that.
Of course you can hear me, Hazel. I've got a loud voice. Hello. That's different people.
We can't hear Brendan, he's quite close.
Okay, as we move forward, can I ask then, anybody that gets up to speak, if you are struggling at the back, please put your hand up and we'll try and address it at that moment in time. But thanks for the observation. Please respect everybody in this chamber. Where was that? Councillor Prophet.
Thank you, Chair. Is that all right? Can you hear? Yeah, testing. 1, 2. I'm going to sound like a sort of record again because this, I apologise, is the third time I've spoken tonight. But again, you know, taking it back to the basics, I'm a bit disappointed that the issues like the National Health Service and possibly homelessness are not seen as local issues because, you know, maybe the NHS doesn't come under the remit of Barrow Borough Council directly, but I'd agree with Councillor Barlow about some of our priorities about keeping our electorate healthy, keeping them educated and keeping them housed as being pretty much the 3 basic needs of a reasonable developed country and a democracy. And I, as an elected representative, I'm not going to shy away from difficult issues that may be not directly within our control. But again, you know, if we're talking about grassroots politics and as being entrusted with our electorate's priorities, then we need to talk about these things, and we can't just forget about them because it doesn't come under our jurisdiction. Whereas actually, housing does, and so I would hope that that this debate isn't dismissed on the basis that it's not something that is either local or needed. I mean, like the NHS crisis, the housing crisis and homelessness, the results as a result of the housing crisis, because it's all about housing, is either a deliberate mismanagement or a mismanagement. Whatever it is a mismanagement. For one of the most richest countries in the world, having people sleeping rough and the hidden homeless as well. We're not just talking about people you see on the streets. It is the people who are sofa surfing, the young people who are having to go from home to home because they can't afford rents. because they can't get onto our housing list because the number of properties that we have has diminished and the amount of funding that we have to maintain properties has diminished, which are all centrally funded, and the impact has been had on our central funding, which impacts on what we can provide. Spiraling rents, dwindling incomes, an aggressive austerity campaign from this government that is targeting the most vulnerable and the youngest within our societies have left people unable to maintain a roof above their heads. In one of the world's richest countries. It's an absolute disgrace. Add to that the loss of our central government funding. How are we supposed to cope? How are we supposed to help people? Absolutely. I think the housing department does a wonderful job in keeping people off the streets, but we could do more. I think it's absolute neglect from central government. I think they need to again reinvest. There is money there. They've got money for other things, deals with the DUP, etc. I could go on. But as far as actually funding local authorities in the north particularly to provide decent housing for their electorate, it's not on the agenda. And again, I would reiterate what Councillor Cassidy said. If they are struggling to do that and they can't think of ways to do that, well, you know, I know one party that certainly does know how to do it, and that is the Labour Party. And I tell you what, step aside if you can't do it, and we will help you do it for us. But going back to it, this is a local issue. It is an absolute disgrace that we are unable to provide housing, particularly for young people, particularly for the most vulnerable people, the people that Councillor Thompson and her charity assist. I've rambled, but what I will say is, again, this is one of the basic principles of a reasonable democracy: providing housing, providing health, and we should be able to do it.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair, and it's nice the people, the lasses downstairs, but the lads, for getting a slap on the back from the homeless unit. Absolutely unbelievable. One of them is accrued holidays and what I'm here to take. Absolutely phenomenal. And just a part of being a part of a parent council. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago, Windsor Council demanded the leader to the rust sleepers to swept off the streets for the royal wedding and whatever. We haven't gone down that avenue yet, have we? Well, it's not on getting married. But they're taken from a government website, Chair. "18 to 21-year-olds from April the 21st, 2017 will not be entitled to help with housing costs." 18 to 21-year-olds, they're out. They can't get nothing. Over 35s will only get housing benefit payable to a single room. Over 35, you get a maximum of £60. Our cheapest rent is £72. The person who come in, you've gone about universal credit, which is going as hard, which is already there. Chairman, I won't go on the local problems or whatever, because this is a national issue. But some of the things that the people downstairs in the housing, homeless there, are absolutely fantastic. And I appreciate, and through you, Chair, will you write a letter for appreciation to the staff?
I would be more than happy to write a letter of appreciation to the staff, and I conclude what you're saying there, for sure. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor McLeavy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of emotive subjects tonight. And is this really what our constituents expect of our local borough council? Constant quotes by our Labour colleagues of national statistics, using the most vulnerable in our society for political gain, and that's what it is. Absolutely despicable and unworthy of anyone. I can go on the same websites and I can quote statistics. I do it all day at work. Just the same as you can. But I'm going to quote one. I didn't want to, but I will. Homelessness more than doubled under the last Labour government, from 45,000 in 1997 to over 104,000. That's about a 137% increase. But of course, Labour stated there was a 70% reduction. However, in reality, and from charities on the ground who do this on a day-to-day basis, said at the time up to 500,000 people were homeless or in temporary accommodation, with a further 380,000 hidden homeless. The last Labour government's record of homelessness and those sleeping in temporary accommodation is nothing to be proud of. So I would say, let those who without blame cast the first stone. So instead of burying your heads in the sand and blaming everyone else, it's not our fault. Constant Tory bashing rhetoric, politics above people. We in this chamber need to work together to tackle these challenges head on and do the best we can locally. We need to work together for our constituents and the people of this great borough of Barrow-in-Furness. Point scoring serves no purpose whatsoever. Our constituents... hold on. Constituents want to know what we're doing locally, what issues are there, and what we, as local councils, are doing. So just quickly, what's this government doing to tackle homelessness? This Conservative government is carrying out the most ambitious legislative reform in generations through the Homeless Reduction Act, investing £1 billion of funding to 2020. Since 2010, over 1 million new homes have been built. House building is at its highest since 2008. This Conservative government is investing £44 billion to reach an average of 330,000 new affordable homes per year to the mid-2020s. In 2017 autumn budget, the Conservative government announced a comprehensive package which will raise housing supply by the end of this Parliament to the highest level since the 1970s. These are great aspirations. These are great aspirations, and I hope to God that they're followed through in their entirety. So if you think we're not concerned about homeless and those living in temporary accommodation, you're dead wrong. National politics has its place, and that place is not here. We can bat statistics back and forth all day long. To what end? When I have spoken to many of you, people that I do know, I have clearly stated I'm not interested in national politics, as many of my colleagues have also said to me. My reason for standing for election in 2015 was to serve this borough and do the best I can to make it a better place for people to live, for our constituents, my children and my grandchildren. We need to put aside politics, backbiting, constant one-upmanship. We need to work together on all the things that concern our constituents, this council and this borough. We need to work together on all fronts, whether it's homelessness, housing, infrastructure, whatever it is, to show the residents that we're here for them and not for our own self-gratification and self-importance. We, fellow councillors, have a chance to make a difference. Let's put aside national politics and do the best we can with what we can actually control. Some things we can do, others we can't. But from my perspective, I'll give it a damn good go, and I'm hoping my fellow colleagues here will as well. So what's most important to you? National politics or the people of this borough? I know what's important to me. Do you? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just before I bring Councillor Murray in, which concern there, Councillor Hamilton, under 13.13, personal explanation, if you feel that you appear to have been misunderstood with what you've said, you can come back.
No. It's just the point of working together. I completely agree with working together, but it would be far easier if the Conservative members, the Housing Forum, actually turned up.
Okay, point noted. Can you turn the mic up, please, Councillor? And Councillor Murray.
I'd just like to start off and say I agree with every word Martin said. This is what we are all elected here to represent the borough, to represent our constituents. As I am an elected borough councillor, my duty is to look after welfare of my electorate. The borough figures have only fluctuated slightly over the past 10 years or more for the rough sleeping and the housing. The council officers are managing the homeless and the rough sleeping due to the professional way Housing Director and his staff are managing the situation with their partners, Furness Housing, Project John, Home Housing. The council has 12 furnished houses for the homeless. Furness Housing has 15 beds. Project John has 17 beds. Home Housing has 8 beds. A total of 40 beds for the homeless and the rough sleepers. The council also works with the private sector, and there is currently spare beds in the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak on this motion, but I think I've got to, because again, the similar themes are coming up. The Local Government Association is members from all local authorities. It is currently Conservative, led by Lord Porter, a strong Conservative. You know, I've spoken to Gary, a strong Conservative. But if you look at what he's saying about the councils being able to borrow to build housing, yes, we have quite a lot of houses in this town. We have houses empty, as can be seen. But we're short of adaptive housing for people. We could do more, but we're completely barred by the government for building more houses to expand our housing department. And it's a local issue controlled by the government. We're having to reduce the rents year by year. That is creating a huge gap in the funding on the housing revenue account. I believe £500,000 that we've got to find. That was a government decision. That's purely a government decision. It's restricting. We are, thank goodness, an authority with 100% decent home standard. We will maintain that. But in terms of long-term maintenance, it is becoming much more difficult to keep as well on top of that as we want to. That is a government decision. They set the rents. These are not things that can be just said, oh, we can only look locally. The block on borrowing for ER is ludicrous. We could borrow cheaply at the moment. We know we can borrow. We could do far more. But this motion was carefully worded. It was picked up. You can see in it. These are the statistics from the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons. This is all taken from that report. These are not ones I've plucked out of the air to make the best use of. And the phrase about the government being unacceptably complacent in the face of this national crisis, that is what the Public Accounts Committee said. This is not selective reporting of statistics. And this is just asking that the government gets its finger out and actually backs what the Public Accounts Committee's recommendations, and also backs what Conservative Lord Porter is saying around giving us freedom on the housing revenue account to do what needs to be done to deliver. These are not things. We cannot separate ourselves from government decisions on housing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor?
Not used to this sort of thing, but I just wanted to bring things locally. I've been as a councillor, been down at the community kitchen in Barrow, which puts hot meals in people that have been sanctioned. And that's when the national becomes local, is when our constituents are getting sanctioned for 11 weeks, was the first person I spoke to. And I know other councillors, when they first came to the kitchen, were in near tears when they heard some of the stories about people sanctioned by the DWP and giving no money. And it's going to get worse, because we're just a pilot for the universal credit, but when it does come, and if it comes, hopefully it won't come in, but if it does, it's going to be much worse than it is now. So I am very glad that the people across the floor said that we want to work together, because we're going to have to when universal credit comes in, because this town will be in trouble if this kind of thing goes across to everybody that needs our help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blizzard. Councillor McEwen to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome members' comments, and I think it was well debated there, and I totally agree with everything that's been said, actually. And for Councillor McCleary to say what he said, I think he's disassociating himself away from nationally and saying we're not working together, and Sean just summed it up. We are all working together, and that's what we're here for. And Councillor Murray, he agreed with Mr McCleary, but there's a man that his residents voted in as a Labour candidate. Now he's going the other way, so I don't know where he's coming from. So I just welcome everybody's comments, and I move the motion, Chair. Thank you very much. I hope the Chamber agrees.
Thank you. The motion, sorry, Councillor Sweeney.
Please can this go to a name vote?
Name vote. Seconded, Councillor Roberts. Thank you. The motion will now be put to a vote. I do apologise. Would you like to come in now? I'll give you the opportunity. Yeah. No, please speak. It's only fair. Please speak.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's just, I've read the Public Accounts Committee report, which was published on the 20th of December last year, and it does state in it, tackling homelessness is the responsibility of the Department for Communities and Local Government. The DCLG said it will improve data around homelessness, but does not yet have a cross-government strategy to tackle the problems. The Homelessness Reduction Act 2017 gave more responsibility to the local authorities and requires them to have a strategy, which we have in place. The Public Accounts Committee will take evidence from local councils about authorities' progress with combating homelessness. So I can't see where the motion is coming from on this. We are complying with what the Public Accounts Committee are asking. But in saying that, the motion is put forward. And I may be nitpicking here, but I notice in all these motions, the wording, it says the council agrees. This is motion 1. The second one, this council is dismayed. The council condemns the government. Council knows. Council shares. Council calls. There is 36 members on this council, and we are not all speaking from the same hymn book. But apparently, on these motions, we are. So why bother putting a motion forward when obviously, as far as the wording is concerned, it's already agreed? But just finishing off there, a lot has been said about us all working together, and I think, on a general, I think we do work together quite well. And I hope that we will do in the future, because it benefits everybody in the borough. And basically, that's the way that we have to go forward. And myself and my colleagues, I think we'll all have a whip round and we'll buy Dave a pair of shin pads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I invite Councillor to sum up.
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor McClure. You said it's not been agreed, it's not been voted on yet, so it can't be agreed. Right? And we all know where the blame lies here. This is why we're going with the government. It's the government that's causing all these problems locally, all over the country, because of the funding cuts that they're doing. I mean, people say it all depends on the paper you read. Well, even your papers are saying the same thing, so I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Councillor. It has been called for a name vote. A vote will now take place.
The motion is now before you. Please could you say for, against or abstain? Councillors Barlow.
For.
Biggins.
For.
Blizzard.
For.
Burns.
For.
Callister.
For.
Cassidy.
For.
Derbyshire.
For.
Gorm.
Against.
Gill.
Abstain.
Hamilton.
For.
Johnston. McClure R.
Against.
McClure W. McEwen.
For.
McLeavy.
Abstain.
Maddox. Murphy.
For.
Murray.
Against.
Pemberton.
Against.
Piddock. Preston. Prophet. Roberts. Seward. Sweeney. Thompson C. Wall.
4.
The motion is carried. 24 for, against, 3 abstentions.
Thank you. Just before I close the meeting, I'd like to compliment our 2 junior adults over there. This is the first time in 18 years that I've been in a council chamber, but fair play, and it'll be nice to see those kids generate and move towards politics. That's the goal. I'm sure they picked up all the right stuff out tonight. Those that know me know that I like to have a little bit of a drink at the end of the meeting, so I invite anybody if you would like a quick drink, bearing in mind Manchester City kick-off. Agenda item 10, the common seal. I move the common seal. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.